Imagine spending 6 years of your life locked inside a maximum security prison for a brutal, premeditated murder. Now, imagine finding out that the crime you were convicted of never actually happened. On the morning of February 20th, 1989, in the tight-knit fishing village of Shelburne, Nova Scotia, Clayton Johnson kissed his wife Janice goodbye and headed off to his job as a high school teacher. Just minutes after he drove away, a neighbor stopped by the Johnson house. He found the 35-year-old mother of two unconscious and bleeding heavily at the bottom of the basement stairs. Despite arriving at the hospital alive, Janice died hours later from severe head trauma. The chief medical examiner evaluated her injuries and officially ruled the death a freak accident caused by a fall down the steps. Every piece of physical evidence at the scene, the position of her body, a small blood stain on the floor, and bloody hair on the wall near the third step, pointed to an accidental fall. There was absolutely no reason for authorities to suspect foul play. 18 months later, the grieving widower made a choice that scandalized the conservative community. Clayton started dating a 22-year-old woman from his church. Townspeople suddenly began whispering about his recent financial struggles and a $120,000 life insurance policy he had taken out on Janice 2 months before her death. That social disapproval quickly warped the community's memory. Two friends who had helpfully cleaned the basement shortly after the accident went back to the police. 2 years after the fact, they suddenly claimed they remembered massive amounts of blood sprayed across the walls and floor. This chart shows the timeline of that morning, which also began to shift. A neighbor who had been on the phone with Janice originally told police they spoke for 10 minutes, ending at 7:50. But 2 years later, she shifted her memory, claiming the call actually happened earlier, from 7:30 to 7:40. Investigators knew Clayton was buying diesel at a local gas station at 7:50. This newly remembered 10-minute gap provided the exact amount of time he would have needed to kill his wife before leaving the house. Based entirely on this revised timeline and the newly exaggerated blood spatter testimony, Clayton was arrested, convicted of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in a maximum security prison. The initial facts of the scene were completely discarded. Small-town gossip had literally talked a man into a life-destroying sentence. From his cell, Clayton contacted the Association in Defense of the Wrongfully Convicted. Their forensic experts threw out the rumor mill and went straight back to the original crime scene photos and autopsy reports. Immediately, 2 independent pathologists noticed a glaring omission. If a healthy woman is bludgeoned to death, her arms and hands should be covered in bruises and fractures. Janice had 0 defensive wounds. They also scrutinized the paramedic reports. When first responders arrived, they found Janice unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, still tightly gripping her car keys in her left hand. Human instinct forces us to raise our hands to protect our heads from a violent attack. It is biologically counterintuitive for a person being beaten to death to keep their fingers securely wrapped around a set of keys. The raw physical evidence pointed toward a severe misinterpretation of the crime scene, making the prosecution's theory of a homicidal beating scientifically impossible. The original medical examiner thought she fell forward down the stairs, but as this diagram shows, a forward fall produces impact damage on the face and forehead. Janice's severe injuries were localized on her left and right temples and the top of her head. Blood spatter expert Herb McDonald proposed a radically different theory. Janice slipped at the very top of the stairs and fell backward. McDonald struggled to find a safe way to physically test the exact biomechanics of a backward fall on a staircase. He was ready to give up until he read a newspaper article about a local high school staging a production of the musical Peter Pan. He borrowed the theatrical flying harness from the school and hired a model of the exact same height and weight as Janice. He built a perfect replica of the Johnsons' basement stairs, covered the model's head in blue chalk, and let her fall backward. The mechanism of injury became immediately clear. As she tumbled backward, the model's head slid perfectly into a narrow 5.5-inch gap between the wooden stair tread and the concrete foundation wall. Her feet then pulled her head from the gap, flipping her over onto the concrete floor. When McDonald checked the model, the blue chalk marks left on the side of her head were a perfect, millimeter-accurate match to the crushing injuries found on Janice's left and right temples. It was undeniable proof. The alleged homicide was actually a highly specific, biomechanically verifiable 1 in a million accident. Confronted with this concrete scientific demonstration, the Canadian justice system intervened directly. Clayton Johnson was released from prison after serving 6 years. The true timeline of that morning finally made sense. Janice finished her phone call at 7:50, grabbed her car keys, rushed toward the stairs, and suffered a fatal backward slip, all while her husband was miles away buying gas. James Locker, the director of the defense organization, observed that Clayton was ultimately exonerated of a murder that science proved never actually happened. The case highlights the extreme fragility in eyewitness memory. Human perception can be easily warped by community gossip and social bias, twisting innocent actions into a motive for murder. But the physical laws of gravity and momentum do not bend to fit a neighborhood rumor. When the legal system is blinded by suspicion, sometimes the only defense against the catastrophic flaws of human bias is the cold, undeniable truth written in the laws of science.